Well, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. We are going to have a fantastic session on the math revolution. And joining me are four outstanding individuals that are doing some really creative work. We have Richard Rusczyk, the founder of the Art of Problem Solving, Jose Torres, the president of the Illinois Math and Science Academy, Inessa Rifkin, the founder of the Russian School of Mathematics, and Adrian Mims. And we are going to jump right in. Each of you represents this new pedagogical ecosystem that has emerged in the field of mathematics. Everything from a elite school that is a residential setting to an in-school model, the calculus project, to the art of problem solving, and then the Russian after-school programs with enrichment centers. What inspired this new pedagogical ecosystem? Jose?
Well, the Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy will be celebrating 30 years next year. And it was rooted in 1985. It was established by the General Assembly to serve by Leon Lederman, a physicist, Nobel Prize physicist from Fermi Lab, to serve the needs of highly talented students in the state of Illinois and to further math and science excellence throughout the state. And so we serve 650 students in a residential setting from 10th through 12th grade. And our alum have gone on to establish and co-found YouTube, PayPal, Mosaic, Netscape, and so forth. And so it's amazing what happens when highly talented students eat and sleep together. There's no sort of ostracization for being smart or for really pushing the envelope, and our faculty have to be just as sort of driven to push these students to excel.
Very good. Richard?
Well, largely I exist because not all the students in the country have access to IMSA. Mainly, I work a lot with very high-performing students all across the country, all across the world, and we're mainly guided by trying to build the things that we wish we had when we were kids. And I think some of our efforts on this stage have created a gap between those students who have access to these things and those students who do not have mathematicians and scientists in their homes and are not able to go to schools like IMSA because there aren't enough of them. And I think that's where you come in. We also have a nonprofit that starts to work with these students in 6th or 7th grade in New York City. But I'd like to go a lot younger.
Adrian?
Mine originated, it started with my dissertation as an administrator and as a math teacher at Brookline High School. And the title of my dissertation was Improving African American Achievement in Geometry Honors, because 60 to 70% of the African American students would withdraw from geometry honors by the second quarter. And so when I finished my dissertation, I basically came up with some strategies and implemented those strategies and ended up creating the calculus project. And all of the black students who participated in the program, not one of those students withdrew from geometry honors, and actually they closed the gap and they outperformed their white counterparts in the class. So when that happened, we realized we really had a nice little recipe, and we just expanded it across all of the other courses. And then the calculus project.
What was the key there? Like, closing that gap there, if you could point to a couple things, like this was the thing we did that really worked.
There were two things, and this is something that doesn't happen in education a lot. Educators don't sit students down and ask them what they need to be successful, and that's one of the things that I did. And one of the things I learned was that with geometry honors, it was an entirely different way of thinking mathematically. They had to write 2-column proofs. You can't write 2-column proofs if you don't know the theorems and the postulates. The other thing is that they would deliberately underachieve and drop down into a lower geometry class, even though they could do the geometry honors, because they wanted to satisfy that social need to be with their peers. And it's actually research done behind it by Signithia Fordham. She calls it racelessness. So what we did, we pre-taught the theorems and the postulates to the students during the summer to cover the entire first quarter to build confidence and to prepare them, taught them how to work collaboratively in groups. And then during the school year, we created a critical mass of 40 to 50% of those students in a geometry honors section. And actually they fought hard to stay in those sections with those peers, and then they weren't inclined to drop down to a lower level.
Inessa, your inspiration is different.
My inspiration is very different. I actually wanted my kids to have what I had when I was a child. So I'm a graduate of special mathematical school in former Soviet Union. And we immigrated in the best country in the world. And we were dreaming about this country. We bought a house in one of the best school districts, exactly for that reason, because education is everything. And suddenly I realized that my kids are not going to have what I had. And it was such a shocking experience for me that I quit my job as software engineer and started Russian School of Mathematics in order to give my kids exactly the same experience that I had when I was a child.
Yeah, you guys need to help me a little more. You're talking, I know you're excited about what you're doing, but unpack this for me. What is this, how are you teaching this mathematics? What kind of pedagogy are you using? I mean, really, how is the Russian school really different, or the art of problem solving, or what we're doing in the calculus projects? I mean, everyone's teaching kids how to do math. I mean, that's why, you know, that's why so many kids are not performing.
They're teaching them arithmetic. I think one of the first things to do for the younger students is to teach them that mathematics is not arithmetic. These are not the same thing. And to show students interesting problems, interesting puzzles. Kids love to learn. This is something that I think when we talk about trying to get more students into math, I think they've got a little bit backwards. It's not to lose so many in the first place. And I think that needs to start as early as we can.
I just came from another meeting, and it was, I believe, Dr. Milina, I'm sure mispronounced her last name. She is doctor of psychology from Stanford University, and she said something that basically we were telling all the time. Kids like to be challenged. They like hard problems. When you give them something easy, you don't encourage them to learn, to think. They like thinking. So the key is in giving them right programs, right curriculum.
So I hear you saying the right programs, the right problems, but what would I experience as a student if I were in the art of problem solving, or in the academy, or in the calculus project? How is it really different? I understand it's about thinking, but describe it for us more.
I think at IMSA anyways, we have students who, our faculty will pose either a real problem or a scenario problem, and students are just invited to solve it. And the faculty member begins to assess individually where students are and to sort of pose questions to them and help guide them versus getting up at the beginning of the class and lecture through it a number of theorems or practices or problem-solving methods. In some of the more theoretical classes, there is some of that, and most recently I've met with some of our students who said what was helpful was that the faculty member had placed their lectures on electronically, and they began to sort of sift through that so that they could come back to the professor. So really problem-based, problem-solving, and really is, as Inessa said, really challenging the students.
I take a two-pronged approach. My belief is this, and that is curricula alone cannot do it, especially with the population I work with. I deal with students who are wounded students who cry because they can't figure out how to solve a math problem. They love math, they love the challenge, but they cry. And so they want to get it. So on one hand, I create rigorous curriculum, but on the other hand, I have to work on changing their attitudes and their behaviors. And my belief is that it doesn't matter how robust the curriculum is. If you're not able to change their attitudes and their behaviors, they'll never be able to fully access it. So with the calculus project, we have the curriculum where we're pre-teaching, it's rigorous coursework, but on the other hand, there's a pride curriculum where we work on changing the attitudes and the behaviors of the students.
I think there's something sitting under what he's saying that more people in this conference may need to understand, which is there is a very, I've been teaching on the internet for 13 years now. That's, it's like dog years, that's like 91 years. So I've been doing this for a very long time. And I happen to be sitting in a niche of students for whom the internet works very well. But there is a very large group of students out there for whom nothing that scales works, and nothing that works scales. Not going to be a popular sentiment in this building, perhaps, but it's very true, and it's why these sorts of efforts are really important.
I think that really points to the challenge. I used to be a superintendent for a school of 40,000 students, and now that I've transitioned to a place where half of my faculty have PhDs, I realize that my third, there's a third grade national board certified teacher that I know who gets nervous when she's about to teach this Common Core mathematics because she doesn't know conceptually what she's teaching. And so the students are actually the students say, oh, she's about to teach math, because she gets all nervous about it, and they lose confidence.
Yeah,
and they lose confidence themselves that this is not going to go well.
Which Jose, you raise a different problem in the educational system. While we have teachers who want to help their students and they are committed to their students, there is this problem, Inessa, I think you called it a betrayal to children, when teachers do not have the conceptual understanding to be able to help their children with the content. And most of your teachers have PhDs. But what have you learned that we could possibly do because a number of you talked about let's face it, you have kids who are enthusiastic about mathematics. Your kids are enthusiastic as well. But what about the kids who are in the standard curriculum in all of our schools? What do we need to do for our teachers to build their instructional capacity?
Teachers should know mathematics first of all. You cannot teach what you don't know and what you don't like. You start with, kids are copying us. If I like it, they will like it too. If I'm afraid of it, they will afraid of it too. And you cannot teach teachers any pedagogical skills, because if they're afraid of mathematics, this is the dead end. That's it. So by the time they're becoming teachers, they can teach mathematics, it's my belief, only if they know mathematics. You cannot teach it down elementary. They will be afraid of next question. This is what I have. When teacher knows, for example, third level mathematics, kids suddenly, smart kid, read something on internet, let's say, and brought question to her, which is 6th grade question. What she's going to do? She was read only for this lesson in 3rd grade. So we should start with it's really catch-21. We should start with educating people. All cultures should change. So all people should know mathematics in order for us to have teachers who know mathematics.
Yeah, they don't have to have PhDs, but they do have to at least they have to at least be literate. They don't have to be masters, but they do have to be literate. And
But I think one of the problems is if we say children aren't reading, everybody gets up in arms. But the fact is, our children aren't doing mathematics very well. And our teachers are the products of the schools that they have attended. And again, they have good intentions. Richard, you have worked a lot online in the technology space. How could we leverage the technology, not just to help our students, but perhaps to help our teachers, maybe to be a different kind of learner or a different role as a teacher?
Well, you have to give them paths to be able to learn more math. Like most of the really great teachers that I've met, when I ask them what is the best professional development they ever had, they almost always talk about a math class. They do not talk about education school. They do not talk about being taught certain pedagogical techniques. They talk about learning math from someone who loved it, and they start to pick up some of that love and some of those approaches. And that's where they learned how to teach, is where they learned. And I think that's setting up the professional development to be more about learning content, particularly in the elementary school space. And I think elementary school teachers will be more open to this than middle school and high school teachers, because a lot of elementary school teachers are elementary school teachers because the system failed them in math. So they'll be open to the message that something is wrong with how we're teaching math because it failed them. Whereas a high school teacher is probably a very successful middle school and high school math student. They probably did okay. So I think you're going to have more, more impact. You certainly have more impact, but you also might have more inroads in going to the elementary school teachers, anybody here who has an elementary school, and talking to them about, hey, let's try something different because this isn't working.
I think the teaching profession is probably one of the most unregulated professions that we have. And what I mean when I say that is that there's so many schools for teachers, there's so many pathways to become a certified teacher that they get all of these varied experiences. And and I'll give you an example. In my district, there were opportunities for teachers to go and earn credit so that they could get a master's plus 30, master's plus 45, which means they can increase their salary. The problem is that some of these courses were held at an Italian restaurant. True. And the thing is that if you think about it, how many of us would want to undergo open heart surgery and we know that the cardiologist was playing that little game Operation, pulling things out, or taking courses at, at an Italian restaurant to prepare to do that? And so it's really reining it in a lot and working with a lot of these graduate schools of education, and not just on content, but also culturally responsive teaching, because this country is becoming more and more diverse, and some of the decisions that are made in the schoolhouse are made, because of bias or unconscious bias.
Adrian, I agree.
To hear more about that, actually. What do you mean by that?
By what?
The cultural bias in the classroom.
So, for example, from what I've seen, for example, course-taking patterns, teachers making recommendations. Teachers do the best job they can, and I know I've gotten it wrong in terms of making recommendations for students, but that accounts for about 30% of the achievement gap. And so some of the decisions in terms of expectations that teachers have for some students are different than others. And they use those expectations in terms of determining how they're going to make the recommendations for the students next year. Now, here's what is structurally problematic with that. When they make those recommendations are made halfway during the school year. So what if the student turns it around and actually becomes a B+ student? Are there mechanisms in place to make sure that you capture that student that was just recommended for a lower level and you bump them up to a more challenging level?
Adrian, isn't that related, though, to what Richard was saying earlier and some of the other panelists about you need to engage kids in thinking? Because if you're teaching arithmetic, we're actually shutting kids off on really simplistic solving as opposed to really thinking and problem solving. And then the ability to access the curriculum really becomes how the teacher is able to guide a student that has a question.
Well, here's what I'm seeing, because I'm in schools almost on a weekly basis. What I'm seeing right now is, and I've sat down and I've spoken to teachers, and what they're saying is this: I have to keep up with a certain pace. On Monday, I have to teach this. On Tuesday, I have to be here. Wednesday, I have to be here. Thursday, I have to be here. So, the left hand has to know what the right hand is doing. Administrators have to be comfortable and empower the teachers. Look, I want to make sure that these students understand these concepts conceptually, and that we're not just looking at standards and getting students prepared for whatever the state tests are. And so that's what's happening. It's a push. And the results that we're getting right now, these are manufactured results. And they're easily fixed. But a lot of these mandates are coming from the top down, and they just do not work for a lot of the schools.
Inessa?
I feel that we waste all of the time that kids have in elementary school. Because then when they're in middle school, in high school, suddenly they have all those tests, we measure them. In elementary school, K, first, second, third grade, they just play. They don't do anything serious. Like at RSM, we start algebra immediately. Not because we want them to know algebra, because it's just something interesting for them. It's just something challenging. And this time should not be wasted. It's not wasted. I mean, everybody in the world doing something serious in elementary school. So we are wasting all those first 3 years. And then suddenly we should basically teach them for tests. Teachers don't have enough time, and we're teaching them for tests, and they're not ready and capable of serious learning because nobody prepared them in elementary school.
So Inessa, you're talking about we need to teach kids, again, how to learn mathematics. Describe for me the teachers you hire for your after-school enrichment program. What does the lesson planning, the professional development look like? And this is for everybody. I imagine for the art of problem solving with your PhD teachers, they're planning. What does it look like?
So for us, we have very rigorous curriculum. We have very rigorous lesson plans already prepared, and everything actually spelled out. We have 3 different levels for kids, and teachers know exactly what they are doing. And then we are all software engineers who started the school, so we have a lot of data to analyze. All their homework online. So we're analyzing data on every child. It's easy for teachers to...
So I'm going to interrupt you because I'm a school superintendent, and I can tell you my teachers are analyzing data every day. And if I picked your information up and I imported it into my schools immediately, bang, I can raise the learning of students.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
that's not the thing
happen.
that we look for when we're looking for teachers. We look for a few things. One, we look for taste. There's taste in mathematics. I'm sure you would agree. I mean, the Eastern Europeans, the Russians, you have phenomenal taste in mathematics. And there's also empathy. This is a very important, probably the critical skill for a teacher to be able to identify when a student has a question, where is that student's intellectual frontier, and what is the right point on that frontier to push to move them in the direction you want them to go. And I think that's what we're evaluating, because we do the same thing as you do. We have the curriculum developed already, and we analyze the data, blah, blah, blah. But when we're actually selecting our teachers, what we are selecting them for is for the teaching skill. We select our curriculum developers for these other curriculum skills. We select our data people for the data skills. But the teachers, and it's what you're talking about, this human component, and I think that's, again, something that all these things that scale don't do well yet. And when they do, when they can replace and do what our great teachers can do, not only we are out of a job, but I think everybody is out of a job. Everybody in the world. I think what the human component of what teachers do is really way out there on the boundary. And when machines can do that, there's nothing left for us to do.
I think that's the challenge that, when you hear Richard and Inessa and Adrian talk about really individualizing education, and when you have 30 students and you don't have a comfort for the subject, then you just want to cover it. And cover is a really interesting word because we're covering, right? Not disclosing it, not opening it up. And so that's part of the challenge, that as superintendents here and I have, which is how do you, even though we can't scale, we have to, because that's part of the job. How do you democratize access to high levels of mathematics, not just competency based, but how do you get students to really problem solve and thinking? And perhaps we need to think about, if the aims of mathematics instruction is problem solving and creative thinking, are there other ways to get to problem solving and creative thinking that doesn't necessitate high levels of mathematics? Are there other disciplines, for example, that get us to those kinds of aims, to numeracy in a different way versus solving a quadratic equation or any other conceptual mathematics?
So the teachers you described are pretty special because they have this passion, enthusiasm, and they have command of their content. I want my kids to have those teachers.
Yeah, they're all working for Google, though. That's the problem.
Exactly. But they are working for Google. So as the explosion of broadband is in all of our schools and technology is available, how do we leverage then the technology to get those best teachers in front of our kids so all of our kids can have access? Is there a way we can do this?
But when you say get the teachers in front of the kids, I mean, people talk about videos. I've made 300 or 400 of videos, and I really think I'm doing PR, and I might be doing a little bit of get the kids enthusiastic and excited about it. I don't think I'm teaching them math. I'm teaching them to think they're learning math. And I think that's what videos are very good at, convincing you that you've learned something. They're not as good at actually teaching you something. I think you actually need to fight with the problems.
You know what, I really think that the culture is the matter. Because I have in my school a lot of very, very well-educated women, for example, who are having their kids and taking 5, 10 years of serious profession that they have. They love teaching at the school because they bring their kids there, they teach at the school. But socially, when they're in the school, they go like, oh, I told my dentist that I was in Russian school and he said, oh my God, I hated mathematics. So socially, it's like math is not a thing to do. So I really think that we have workforce, even now. People retired in 65. I have a lot of friends who retired and who teach in our school. They love it. So I think we have enough educated people in different stages of their life who know mathematics and who can teach mathematics. If it will be socially not even acceptable, but celebrated.
Yeah, and if they have the kind of students you have at the Russian School of Math, and we have, and you have, like...
This is different because after I had this talk with all of you, I went to all of my classes. And in one of the classes, I had the kids of my cleaning lady and kids of #1 venture capitalist in Massachusetts sitting in the same class. So we have different people. It's again, we are $20 per hour. We are very democratic. So we have a lot of different people. We have taxi drivers over there. It's more like parents' expectations. I think that how we are different, that parents expect their kids to achieve. And this is where we are selected. So, but parents' expectation, it's cultural thing. We can change it. I mean, we all can change it. It's expectation of knowing mathematics. It's like literacy expectation.
You know, I was just last week at the National Press Club where the leadership conference just issued out a poll called the New American Majority on Black and Latino students, just the first one of its kind after ESEA, the Every Student Success Act, has been issued. And most of the findings were not that revealing for those of us who are working in urban education and with people of color. But something that came out of that poll was that parents were saying, this is only parents of Black and Latino students, and they were across the demographics. They were saying, schools don't have enough high expectations for my kids. So the parents of these students are saying, they're not challenging my kids enough in that school, even though I love my school. I don't like the school system, but my school is doing great.
So why doesn't it happen?
I think there are two things I just want to address quickly. I think that we can't get too caught up in technology. Technology is a tool, and I listened to Sal Khan talk about Khan Academy a couple of years ago in Las Vegas, and he said it himself, it is a tool. And one thing that those tools cannot do is when you put a child in front of a video screen or whatever, they can't look at that, no one can look at that child and say, okay, you didn't really get what I just explained, so let me differentiate the instruction and do it differently. So technology will never be able to replace a teacher because of that. But I think if you use a tool in the right way, I've used software, I've used the Alex program, which has allowed me to work with students who are in different types of math classes because it will individualize the curriculum. But I still had to walk around to each of the terminals to see and make sure that they were on task and show them a different way if they couldn't figure it out. The other piece I just want to address quickly is the role of parents. And in the calculus project, the parents have to come out to an info session meeting because I have to create that sense of urgency so that they are partners with me. And I have to help them understand that you don't have to know how to do the math to help your child. And just to give you an example is parents always say, well, I did the math differently when I was in school. I can't do the homework. I can't do it the way that the teacher's teaching my child. Okay, you don't have to. But if your child has been assigned 10 problems to do and he or she only does 5 and the other 5 are blank, then what that parent can do, that parent can say, okay, well, you don't know how to do those other 5 problems. I want you to write a question for each one of those problems so that when you go back into the classroom, the teacher will look at those questions and say, oh, okay, now I know what I need to do. A parent doesn't have to have a PhD to do that.
We're in agreement that we need to teach kids to think, that they need to have problem-based learning. Sort of not sure about the technology piece, but I actually think that there may be some work that all of you are doing that if we thought about it differently, could we empower our students and our teachers to have access to, again, those people who have command of mathematics, if we think of it in a new and different way? What if our students set up personal learning networks and they were able to engage with those mathematicians on a regular basis around a problem dealing with mathematics, and the teacher's role in the classroom were to change? What might that look like? Does the teacher have to be the know-all in the classroom, or could we leverage technology in some way?
So here's what I do with my program. I'm able to identify during that first summer students I know that if they stick with the program that they will be really good at math. And so around the time they go into the 10th grade, we know for sure. And so what we do, we take those students and we train them how to become peer teachers. And we hire them. And we have them come and they teach, they assist the other teachers in the classroom, and they get paid $10 an hour. I still have this now, even at the program at BU. I have students who've graduated from the program come back who are in college, and they're being paid. And it's mutually beneficial. One, when the students were doing it in high school, they told me that it made them stronger mathematicians because they were helping the younger kids. The younger kids found out, wait a minute, I can make $10 an hour being smart, being good at math. Can I get a job? And so it really motivated them. And so when you have teachers who may not, be available, when those students are seniors, they're very seasoned, they're pretty seasoned, and they can go in and they can help out. I'm not saying they're highly qualified, but they're better than no one in the classroom. And I've even encouraged some of my students, and they've taken the teacher's test in Massachusetts and passed it. Not to say that they're highly qualified to teach, but just to show that this is a strong program, and trying to create a counter narrative about who can and who cannot do math.
So Andre, you just described though that students are acting as peer, I would say activators of knowledge, but there's still a teacher in the classroom that is actually really acting as that expert to help them with that problem solving and that learning. Why couldn't we do that with the art of problem solving, where I facilitate my students' learning as we go through a lesson or a problem together? Or why couldn't we do that with professional development for teachers, where I know you have those lesson plans where teachers plan together and they create own video and they critique each other. Why couldn't we do that where we put teachers in a group and we have personal learning networks for our teachers, so they're learning as well as for our students?
I think there are a few different things. For the teachers, it's creating the incentives for the teachers to do it. The teachers are already working a lot. The good teachers, the ones who would want to take advantage of this, they're already at 50, 60 hours a week. When are they possibly going to do this? For the students, it's a little bit different. If we want to give them access to the sorts of teachers that we have at Art of Problem Solving, you have at RSM, or you have at IMSA, there just aren't enough of them. There just aren't enough people who can operate at this level with these students yet. We're not it's a great thing in America that's happened over the last 40 years. You go back 40 years, you had half the population for whom just about the only intellectual pursuit they could pursue was teaching. And I'm talking about women. It's a wonderful thing that now that they have many more options. But now, of course, they have many more options. They're not all going to go teach. And you have this in Eastern Europe. In Eastern Europe, you had a whole, for 3 generations, a great thing for an intellectual person to do was to go teach. There weren't many other opportunities in Eastern Europe to progress either socially or just intellectually or even financially. From what I understand, they largely left the mathematicians alone, right? They might not have understood what they were doing, and that's why, and that's great. But culturally speaking, this is how these things could emerge in Eastern Europe and not here. It's it's a good thing that these things, that these other opportunities have arisen, and this is why the United States leads in so many different things, is that our very able people can progress at the rates that they want to progress. They aren't held back by the system once they leave school. While they're in school, they are held back. And that's, it's good for business. It's been very good for me and for my team, and I'm sure for some of us up here. But we've been talking a lot about these kids who are trying to get them into math and get them to do well. What about the kids who already are doing phenomenal? We hold them back. We hold them back a tremendous amount. We put ridiculous demands on their time until they get to college. Then once they get to MIT or Stanford or wherever they're going to go, then they can really take off. While they're still in high school, they can take off, but it's very hard because of the demands on their time.
But Richard, I think that, I have programs much like the programs that we're talking about up here for a select group of kids, but one of the problems that I have is I got to take care of the kids who are already positioned to excel and go to the MITs and the Caltechs and so on. But I still have a large portion of children in my classrooms, and I do not accept and will not accept just because children come from poverty or they do not speak English or whatever, that they cannot learn mathematics. How do we tap that talent in those classrooms? And I know it's with the teachers, but some way, I guess the challenge maybe is to this group. We must find a way to help our teachers at the elementary level particularly develop this instructional capacity and that they have access to these quality resources to help our children. Because I know for a fact there are more kids, and Adrian, you're doing it with Kids at Risk, more kids that they have untapped talent, and we have to change this culture. We must.
But Christine, in some schools that are magnet schools at the elementary level, and they don't have to be like IMSA, but in a regular school system, we already have specialty math or science instruction, and in kindergarten, first and second grade, those students go to that particular teacher to receive that kind of instruction. It's not resource intensive, and we do that with art and music already, and so we could scale that to identify particular teachers who love math. The issue that you've heard here is that people need to love it. They need to know it. They have to be passionate about it, and they need to love mathematics, not just arithmetic, if you will. And so that's the challenge that could be. I think it's solvable.
I think it's solvable. I think it's a huge problem. I think you said it earlier, Richard. It's hard to take this to scale. But the fact of the matter is, zip code, if we don't find a way, either leveraging the technology or getting more kids to have access to these great teachers, then zip code determines your future, and that can't happen. We have to change this culture.
Well, one of the things that I said earlier about working with parents, you have to create a sense of urgency so that they can buy in and want to partner. Right now, there is no sense of urgency in this country. As long as there are private schools where there's an alternative for the people who have the financial means to send their kids to a private school, what's the motivation to advocate to fix the public schools in those zip codes? And a lot of the laws that are being handed down regarding education or whatever, the people on Capitol Hill, the congressmen, the senators, I'd like for someone to do research and look and see where their children go to school. A lot of them probably go to school in private schools. A lot of them probably go to schools in wealthy suburban districts. But they're not talking about the schools that I'm talking about fixing. And when you have a situation right now where calculus is a gatekeeper course for students, not just going into STEM professions, but even being accepted into college. Some colleges, if you don't have calculus on your transcript, you save the money, save the application fee. But only 50% of the high schools in the country offer calculus. So it's just like what you said, have and have nots. Your educational opportunities do depend on your zip code. It can also depend on your gender. It can also depend on whether English is your first language, and also your race.
Well, I'm very optimistic about the future, and I think the people in this room are thinking about mathematics. And I think that our challenge has to be is all kids got to have access to these good teachers. And I think technology might be able to play a role, and I think some of the ideas might be here. Is there a way, I mean, yesterday we heard a speaker, superintendents, on this notion of personalized learning networks. And students need to go out and find experts. That's what you all described up here, experts in mathematics. Could we set up a structure that allows students who are enthusiastic about mathematics, regardless of where they go to school, urban, rural, suburban, the highly able, those who have the interest, so they could access these personal learning networks. And I, as a teacher, may not have all the content knowledge I need, but could those individuals be mediators to help them learn?
Yeah, I mean,
while I help activate it.
You hit the key point already, which is the highly enthusiastic. Once you have highly enthusiastic, you've won the game already, right? I mean, there are lots of resources. The internet is very good at that. It is very good at highly enthusiastic. Our online communities, over 200,000 kids. And they're all talking mostly about math, some about video games, but it's mostly about math. They're excited about it, and there are lots of these sorts of things out there. And maybe this is what we should be talking about, is that the teachers need to get the students to be or remain highly enthusiastic about math, because I think once you have the highly enthusiastic part, then the things that can scale can start to work. But there, like I said before, there are a lot of students out there that's the step that's missing, the highly enthusiastic. So you're talking about in your class, you've got taxi driver parents and all this. They've got culture at home that gives them what they need to succeed. There are a lot of students who simply don't have that, and that's the puzzle to me. I mean, this is something
I'm an elementary teacher, and I
on.
have to jump back in here because I have to tell you, elementary kids are enthusiastic about mathematics. All of my kids were. The question really is, back to what I think you said earlier, Richard, if we're teaching them arithmetic, are we really, earlier we heard the doctor speak on the brain research, and she talked about the brain has to be challenged at a certain level of problem and difficulty level in order to stay engaged. So if I'm in a school and you're teaching me arithmetic and I'm just in the rote learning, am I really learning? So if I'm engaged and if I'm being challenged, then I'm going to learn. So is it really students who are enthusiastic, or is it really giving kids access to the mathematics in a problem-based way so that they learn to problem solve? Because I think that's what you were describing earlier, Inessa. That's what you do with your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. But another thing that I want to take us a little bit off track, those congressmen and senators who send their kids to private schools, my problem was here when I came to this country, that even those private school kids are not learning on the level I learned in Soviet Union in just regular school. Okay? So, and my problem was that it was okay with everybody around me. That we have Phillips Academy. I don't know how many presidents graduated Phillips Academy. And their kids come to my school for summer program. They already pay $50K or something per year. Then and the country is okay with it. So if they are not listening even those who are enthusiastic, I mean, as a country, we have a problem. Of course, we have a problem with kids who cannot, with bad zip codes, but we have a problem on all levels. Right. And that's why I'm saying changing the culture, this is our first priority, when they are not okay with it.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing. I mean, yeah, kids in private schools, they need to be engaged and they need to probably be more enthusiastic. But my point that I was making about if, their parents are congressmen and senators, whether they access math or do well, they're still going to be fine on most levels, because there is a legacy piece that is pervasive throughout this country. One last thing I just want to say about enthusiasm, and I deal with kids, as I said before, who, some of them are enthusiastic, but some of them are wounded. It only takes, if a teacher says to a student, 100 wonderful things, accolades, you're wonderful, you're working hard and everything, but one out of those 100 things, that the teacher says is nice, something like, wow, you can't get that yet, what's wrong with you? They'll remember that one thing and not the 99 great things that that teacher said. And teachers, I think, have to understand the power that they have, because I deal with some of these kids who don't like math anymore because they felt as though their teacher didn't believe in them. And the teacher, I'm not saying it was deliberate. It could have been something that the teacher didn't even think about at the time. But these do, cause battle scars for kids. Our luncheon speaker talked about myths.
Right.
And I think these folks especially would be great at potentially writing an article around the myths of teaching mathematics. For example, the myth of, if you're fast, you need to be fast to do good math. And I was, right? I mean, you guys all are shaking your head. But I was, I have to admit it, I was in a school in a district that we were really pushing this idea of, 100 problems in a minute, that whole, math in a minute kind of thing, because we were trying to build fluency. And we thought that that would be teaching math. And some kids that are really good at math get turned off because they may not be able to do all of those that quickly, but doesn't mean that they're not good in math or that they could not problem solve. It's just that they couldn't, they were stressed by that kind of, exercise.
I mean,
right? I mean, what's the role of speed?
I mean, this is one of the general problems with a lot of our identification mechanisms to try to determine if a kid is really talented in math is we have a lot of false negatives in these. So you can find out if a kid has potential to be very good at math by taking an IQ test or a math contest or one of these things, but they're certainly not going to catch all of the talented students or even many of them. So the students who don't do well in speed. So this is a huge problem in competitions for younger students. They identify, well, I can't win this contest, therefore I must not be good, even though that the limiting reagent is the speed or the access to the content and not actual capacity or desire. And that's something we have to be careful about in identification. Anybody who's in control of a gifted and talented program or something like that, take a good hard look at your measurements, because nobody's solved the Gattaca problem yet. Nobody knows how to measure a student's potential with a test.
So we just have a few minutes left. I'm going to give each of you just an opportunity to react to one final thought, and that is, what is your view on innovative models for the future of learning, and why are they important?
It's important to experiment. I mean, we develop our materials, we deliver them in lots of different media because kids are different. They are different people, they learn in different ways. And even though half the stuff we produce is not something I would use, that's because I learn differently. I like books. That's great, that's enough for me, but students are different. This is why it's important to innovate. It's not to find the best practice that's going to work for everybody, but it's to have many different practices so that we can eventually fit a practice to a student appropriately.
I think computers are great. They should be used where they are the best. It's not in teaching kids. Nobody is better than teacher. But for example, instant homework check. Right now we have TSM. They submit all answers and they immediately have feedback. That and that and that problem wrong, and you can have hints and keep working. So this is very good to develop learning skills. Like, okay, this is what's wrong. I have to keep working. So computers are good, and innovative thinking is always good. Not everything is going to be used, but a lot of it will be used. And times are changing, and teaching should be changing.
We have time for 2 questions from the audience. Yes, sir.
If you guys are just blue sky for a second, what would be some, whether it's policy changes, changes in the way that dollars flow, something to like really fix this at scale, right? I've heard a lot of, wow, this is great, but it can't scale. Oh, wow, these things are scaling, but they're really not as good as they could be. Like, could we get everybody, like all those people that are going to Google, should Google mandate that they also teach math in the summer? Like, wait, who's that?
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear the people who have been in the education system, because you understand the restraints a lot.
I think part of it is the curriculum. I mean, really to get someone to rethink the mathematics curriculum from kindergarten through high school. I think we may not be doing it the right way.
I think, for example, okay, so the school year is 180 days. What's the research behind it? There is no research behind it. So when I was in school, I took algebra in the 9th grade. We're asking students to take algebra in the 8th grade and in some places the 7th grade. And we're still saying 180 days. you're asking them to learn more and to do more in the same finite amount of time. So the first thing you're going to have to do, you're going to have to pour in the money and extend the school day, the school year. The other thing you're going to have to do, you're going to have to attract really good people to teach. Right now, teachers are getting beaten up. I work in I implemented the Calculus project in a district where before the school year was over, 50 teachers walked out of the building, out of the district. And they weren't going from that school to another school. They were leaving the profession. And part of the reason is because their pay was based on the performance of their students. Now, we know that doesn't work. It didn't work in corporate America, so why are we doing this in the schools? What it does do, it drives the best teachers out of the worst schools. So when I go in and I implement my program, I was in one particular middle school. After that summer, both of the teachers that we had trained were gone and the principal. So we have to, everyone always says money isn't the problem. Money is part of money isn't the solution. Money is a huge part of the solution, but you have to make sure that it's directed and that there's accountability, and that in terms of putting things in place, that you do it in a thoughtful and purposeful way, and kind of think about what are some potential unintended consequences. We tend to take a knee-jerk reaction and just do things offhanded and don't think about who we help and who we hurt.
We have a gentleman over here.
I'm the founder of STEMeasy.com. This has 15,000 maths problems and solutions. It's free. Here, every student can learn mathematics anywhere at his own pace and by himself. It's a self-education program. So, what I'd say is, when I was growing up, my parents were illiterate and I didn't have any teachers. So I developed this program to teach myself maths and all the subjects on my own. And this was so successful that I came to America. And so now I have put this whole thing on the web. And so go for it, try it, and the problems you are talking about, you will find will be solved. Because learning is programming your brain. A teacher can't program your brain. You have to program your brain by yourself. And you do that by solving problems. And what I'm telling you was confirmed by the New York Times in a very detailed article last year. And you will see this also on the website.
So clearly we're not going to solve all the problems today because I'm getting time here. But we have a very serious problem, I think, that we all recognize, is that we talk about if students aren't able to read, that we have a crisis. We have a crisis because we have too many students who are not able or not doing mathematics well. And I don't believe it's the kids. I believe it is our culture and what we have done as a country. So we look to you to help solve that problem. Some of the ideas are here, but they are complex, and there is no one size fits all. But I still believe we can do it. We must do it for the sake of the children in our country. Thank you very much to our panelists.
Thank you.